Haere Mai, whanau. Welcome to the Whānau podcast, which is a podcast that invites people from all walks of lives to converse about various access to equity in the context of Aotearoa, New Zealand. We invite people like yourself and our beautiful guests today to share their lived experience in effort to identify common threads, social networks, support system that uplifts the collective human experience. Today, what is our season 2 question, Kelsey?
So we are exploring what does equity in knowledge look like for various communities coexisting within one society.
And we're not actually in the
small
business. Yeah, small question.
Yeah.
So we're not actually in the business of telling other people's stories. So this is a beautiful time that we invite our beautiful, intelligent, amazing friend Jaimie to tell us exactly who you are, how you are, and what makes you you.
Kia ora, kōrero. I'm just so pleased to be here, and thank you so much for such a great opportunity. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this today. Ko wai o, ko Jaimie Veale taku ingoa. I use she, her pronouns. I don't know, like there's lots of things about me. I guess we're talking about knowledge. I can say that I'm a lecturer in psychology. There's heaps more about me too. Like me and Kelsey met each other through like softball and queer community stuff. I'm sure there's lots of bits about me that and which I will share as we go, more than just that.
Oh, thank you so much. Hey, and that's something that we even forgot ourselves, so thank you for plugging that in. My name is Maluseo, and people use he, him pronouns for me, and I like that.
I'm Kelsey, and people use they, them for me.
Yeah. And so we just want you to also invite you to finish the sentence. I am, and then whatever comes after that.
I am enjoying the warm spring weather today.
Love that.
I am learning to use my voice, believe it or not, as someone who has a podcast. Using my voice is a new experience for me. So our first question for you, Jaimie, is what is knowledge to you? So if you were to define knowledge or the word knowledge, what does that bring up to you?
Oh, wow. Big questions. Gosh, this feels like a very academic question, and like the academic in me wants to pick it apart in that way. I don't know. I feel like it's pretty simple. It can be pretty simple, just knowing things. Knowledge is I guess to me how much of the things we know. But I don't know. It's got to be more than that. Like thinking of an individual knowing things. And you talked about equity in communities. Like I feel like there's more than just a whole bunch of individuals who will have their own things that they bring, but I feel like there's also often missing from the conversations like community knowledge and knowledge that's a bit more broader than that. I guess it's a bit of a fuzzy concept, but I think it's something that's really empowering as well. Being able to know things can be helpful for us living our best lives and being our full selves. We're in the middle of a situation like, for example, right now where we couldn't all be together in person, unfortunately, because of a pandemic, global pandemic, and having knowledge for things has really helped humans to be able to deal with that in so many ways. So it can be a really powerful thing too, I guess. Is that too academic?
Not at all.
More. Dive deeper. Because I guess to me, I'm curious as well. As an academic, how do you come into privileging certain knowledge bases over the other? You know, you did say that you're a lecturer. So how do you in psychology, is it? Yeah. So how do you privilege? Like, how do you negotiate? Instead of privilege, sorry, how do you negotiate the different knowledges that exist around your topic of expertise?
Yeah, great question, and it's so important for us. And psychology has a history of coming from a very, very Western Pākehā, you know, particularly, and even still to today, it's particularly North American psychology is just so dominant. Like, I guess very, very, I guess white North American type of psychology is just so dominant in our discipline. Yeah, absolutely. We're getting really academic, but yeah, it's so important to understand that there are different types of knowledge, and so I guess the Western Pākehā kind of way of viewing things often tries to bring that quite scientific lens to it, which is and sometimes some particular things that might be really helpful if you're interested in my view, if you're interested in something like, a certain type of the brain, whether that does, what that might be used for, that could be really helpful. But I think it's also really important to be aware that that's not the only type of knowledge, and that there are many other worldviews, and that we can actually, I guess for me as a Pākehā person and coming very much from that background, there's so much we can learn from other types of knowledge, and also it gives learning about other types of knowledge really gives us a chance to reflect on our own types of knowledge. You can actually look at it to some extent from the outside, so be able to see that the Western Pākehā science way of looking at things, that it seems to try and slice things up into these individual parts, like looking at in psychology we tend to often focus, and I think sometimes too much, on just individual humans, or even that's the scientific way, even different parts of the brain, but we're actually we're social beings, and we live in communities, and we live in so many more different ways. So for much of the topics that we look at in psychology, I reckon is often very overlooked. We haven't been great with thinking about broader context and broader communities and societies, and absolutely other forms of knowledge, Māori, Pacifica, and other non-Western Indigenous forms of knowledge. I feel like they're super helpful, and I've got some great colleagues who work in this space who I've learned so much from over the years. That's me talking a lot. I'm keen for others' perspectives on this.
No. No, well, at the same time, I also wanted to ask, because I feel like psychology is one of it's actually a really popular discipline for a lot of the younger generations to jump into. Like, a lot of our younger generations, and especially in our previous job, me and Kelsey would go out, and a lot of people would actually want to jump into psychology. And I guess for me, I wanted to ask, for my own curiosity as well, what is interesting about psychology for you? And at the same time, what is psychology? Like, what is psychology to you? Not so, because I don't want you to answer on behalf of everybody else, but I'm like, what is psychology to you as someone who's actually in the field and participating in the arena, And because from the outside, it could be this wishy-washy name, and everybody, subjectively say psychology is this, and this. So I would love to hear from you what psychology is to you.
Great. And going to your question of why it's so popular, actually, this is, I have some views, but actually I think you two in your previous roles would have some great insights there. So I think I'd be keen to hear from you two on that. I feel like on the basic level, I could get into scientific definitions and all of that, but I think it's about humans, and people find humans interesting, and I think a lot of people are interested in psychology because they want to help people, make things better for people, or make the communities better, and people often think about the massive amount of mental health issues that are out there, those kind of things. And I guess there are other problems which psychology often focuses on too, which are super important. And so I can totally see why it is so popular.
Kelsey, what do you
think about why psychology is quite popular?
Kels?
So Malu and I used to work in student recruitment for tertiary education. So we would go into high schools and talk to young people about what they want to do after school in regards to tertiary study. And there was a lot of young people who were coming up to us over those couple of years saying, hey, we want to do psychology, want to jump into this or that. And I would ask them, and sometimes the young people would say, oh, because it sounds cool. And I was just like, sweet, thanks for your honesty. Do you know what psychology is? And half the time they would have no idea. Or their version of psychology was not what they might actually get taught in the psychology program. And turns out maybe they wanted to be counsellors or something like that. But then there were some young people who came up who had experience with psychologists who wanted to then, through mental health challenges or whatever, who then wanted to give back to community and give back to, themselves as a young person. Like, what can they offer when they're finished their program? And I think also some of those young people saw what psychologists were doing and thought that maybe that they could, as a young person, once they finish their program, be able to work more closely with other young people in that space as a way to relate. Yeah. But yeah, there were some young people that just thought it sounded cool. Which cracked me up. Yeah. What about you, Malu? What did you hear from young people in schools?
Yeah, echo that. Actually, very similar nuances of that. And I feel like for me, a lot of not to generalize, and to also to stay true to my journey and the people that I was in proximity to, they would speak, and it was mainly mostly females who wanted to know more about themselves and wanted to know more about how they fit into their family dynamics, they fit into the schooling dynamics, they fit into all of these different dynamics, and they didn't articulate it in that way, but that's the gist of what all of them collectively said. They're like, I just want to understand more about how the mind works and how we move. And I'm like, I love what you said as well, Jaimie, in regards to that, because you said it's about people and wanting to know people, and I think that's such a really fundamental rooting of being like, okay, well, why do my thoughts exist? Like, what's the whakapapa of my ideas and my thinking and my feelings? And to me, as much as that's at the forefront, I feel like a lot of the students at the beginning were really just excited at the word. Like they did say, a lot of them said, the word is a new, and they just wanted to. It's almost being like, I just want to say the fanciest word I know. Psychology, and a lot of them were excited about the word of being like, I actually want to discover what this word looks like as a garment, or as something that I can wear, as something that I know, or something that I can feel and be in proximity to.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Like, I feel like people are interesting. Maybe I'm biased.
No, I feel that I don't talk with that at all, 100%. And I feel like you said it as well. Like, you said we are social creatures. Like, I don't know anyone to be self-made and self-raised, so I'm very much backing up and your whakaaro around that.
Do you teach any first year stuff, Jaimie?
Not at the moment. I've done bits and pieces in the past.
Yeah. What is some of your experiences been with first year psych students?
Yeah, so I've just really come in as guest lecturer, so I haven't had a lot of experience with that. I feel like there's we have some quite really big classes. I'm at the University of Waikato, and I think it's it has been over 400. I think it's getting even bigger now.
Wow.
With COVID, a lot of people are deciding to go back to study. We have a lot of students from like throughout the university who will come in to psychology just as an interest. So they're not really looking. So they might be doing law or even engineering or something else, and they might get the option to have some elective papers. So we'll get quite a few of those students, and then we'll get the ones who are the core. I guess for me as well, like back in when I started out, I didn't initially start out in psychology. I thought I was going to do political science. Then I took one psychology paper, and I thought, hey, this is quite interesting, and feel like I could do quite well in this. So I decided to keep sticking at it, and then I did a double major, and then decided to keep going. So anyway, getting back to your question on first years, it's really quite a broad range. I'm sure it's a really steep learning curve for a lot of people. Like you talked about some of the ideas that people might have. Some of them are really, really onto it. But some others might go into it without really perhaps having much idea of what they're getting into. And that's great too. Hopefully they're the ones who can really benefit from hearing what we have to say. And it's such a broad area, and that's what we try and do in first year, give them a little taster, like one lecture usually on all of the things across the board, which can be quite a lot to take in, but I think it's also helpful for people to see the diversity that we have in terms of the way we go about things.
And what do you personally like? What's your takeaway? So like, what inspires you about psychology? Because there is a broad spectrum on that. So what's the when did you get that buy-in? After that first lecture, you were like, okay. Is there one specific section a part is there one specific topic around psychology that really excites you at the moment?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if there's one kind of light bulb moment. I mean, I always knew I was quite interested in people in general and social issues, but I wasn't quite sure to begin with what that looked like. I talked about political science, and I'm still very interested in politics. But it's just kind of as I went on and got to look at more specific things. I was interested in, particularly around health and well-being, mental health, gender and sexuality is a big part of what I currently research. So that's a fascinating area, right? I feel like I'm sure that
yes, you're right. Your assumptions is correct. Go there.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so once I got to start doing research, that's really when I started to, I guess, fall in love, not necessarily psychology. And I will say that these days, while I am a psychology lecturer, what I do is very multidisciplinary. So I work with I look to publish in journals or in outlets which are, I can go from medicine to very social science. I worked in a school of nursing when I was in overseas for a while. So I work with people of all sorts of different disciplines, like legal people sometimes, depending on if that's what the topic I'm looking at. So it was really, I guess, getting into the research which made me start to fall in love with, I guess, not just psychology, but, actually doing academia or doing research per se. And that was when I got to doing my master's. That was at postgrad level.
And what was your master's around?
It was looking at sexuality in trans women particularly. Up until that point, I didn't really move into the health area until a bit later. Up until that point, all of the stuff, I guess psychology has, which I touched on before, has a bit of a checkered history, and it has with trans people too. It's come and looked at the sexuality of trans people just generally in a very pathologizing way. It's been particularly as it has with with being gay, being a mental disorder, and being trans in the past, and part of that has been like looking at trans women, and all of the, I guess, research before that had been looking at sexuality, comparing trans women with cis men. So mine was my research was we were interested in looking at actually it was one of the first in the world to look at using cis women and looking at similarities and differences in sexuality broadly. So that was pretty cool.
I really want to read this now.
Oof.
I don't know
It's
that that's what
probably
you're
available
doing.
somewhere.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
probably
just
available somewhere if you
Google it. Yeah.
Sitting
Wow.
on a shelf in a library somewhere.
Yeah, surely at the uni, right? You can go find it.
Oh yeah, there's a master's archive there, so I'm like, oh, just Google the name.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. Yeah, I definitely want to jump into that space a little bit more when I eventually do my master's.
In particular.
Yeah, I went back to study over the last, over the end of 2020 and the start of 2021, and did a grad program in gender and sexuality studies. It was really interesting. Yeah, and definitely increased my desire to explore that space further in the academic world. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Eventually, when I do my master's in 10 years.
Great. Yeah, no, I work with those folks in gender and sexuality studies too.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah. So good. So you've talked about acquiring knowledge through academia. Is there any other ways that you feel like you acquire knowledge?
Yeah, so it's been pretty big for me, and yes, I've learned lots through academia, but just through, I would say, general life, but just through trans community connections. So much knowledge there, that is so important for academia, because, well, at least it's something that I guess those voices that have been missing from academia so much. So yeah, for example, I talked about the pathologization of trans people in the past. When I first got into psychology or doing research in this space in, I guess, the mid-noughties, it was still there was still, and perhaps I'd internalized some of that stuff a little bit. There was still very much that view of being trans as pathologizing, and it's been trans communities that have really led the way with working to depathologize. So now being trans is for example, the World Health Organization has its International Classification of Diseases, which is this book, or it's probably not a book so much now as an online collection of all the different categories and codes that the doctors can diagnose. And they've moved, there was a diagnosis related to being transgender, and that's being moved out from the mental health, mental disorders section that they called it, through to it is something that there is still a code for, that's something like conditions related to sexual health, which might help with healthcare access for things like hormones and surgeries. But there's that movement towards what we call depathologizing, so not seeing it as a mental disorder anymore. And anyway, so that's really been led by trans communities, and I've just learned so much from so many trans people. Trans, when I use the word trans, I'm including non-binary people, so binary and non-binary trans people. Yes, so many trans people I've learned from in my life. So that's just been so massive for my I guess not just my career, but for my career, also for my personal life, for being able to have, I guess, more empowering ways of thinking about who I am and knowing who I am, which is so important too. Yeah.
Amazing. And you said you started your research around the mid-noughties, which I like that. The mid-2000s. How has that knowledge that you've acquired through that time shifted and moved with you? Because we just went back and re-listened to season 1, and we're like, okay, yeah, I don't agree with that. Okay, that's cool. That's hitting different. And so I'm curious how like this acquisition of knowledge and the knowledge that you've acquired through time has kind of moved and shifted with you. Do you often go back and reflect on stuff, or like some of the stuff you've written?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And like when you were mentioning my master's thesis, I'm like, well, that's cool. And there's some bits in it which, you know, I'm quite proud of, but, you know, the field of trans health has moved so much, and, you know, there's, you know, language which I definitely wouldn't use today. You know, we use words like transsexual to describe ourselves, which is, I understand it's being reclaimed a little bit, but, you know, not in the way that, it was conceptualized back then. And, you know, we used words like gender variance, now we might say gender diversity. You know, the language really changes.
Yeah.
So, but I guess not just the language, but, you know, those, like I said, the narratives and the ways that we can think about ourselves have changed too. So yeah, it always changes, and yeah, but that's okay, I think, right? Like it's a time and a place. Yeah, I think as long as we're giving it our best, and always willing to learn, always being, I guess, humble and taking feedback, and, you know, not making sure that we're somebody who's open to new ideas. I think that's really all we can ask of ourselves, right? It's always going to change over time, and I think we always need to be open to giving people space to change over time too. I think that's super important. Yeah, particularly in a field like trans health, where it's just change. It just changes. The language changes so rapidly. So yeah. Is that kind of what you were asking? I'm not sure
like,
if I completely hit the nail.
No. You go, of course.
There you go. Outstanding people doing it again. Like, profoundly amazing us, and we're just taking our time to mull it over because we're like, whoa. Yeah. And you're like, I don't know though. It's the humble. I love it. It's the humble.
Yeah. What do you two have perspectives on that? I'm interested to hear. Knowledge changing over time, and how that.
Oh, for sure.
You have your own experiences of looking back on last year. Yeah.
Malu's hiding. We did a full review of season 1, and we went back and listened to every episode. And that's just kind of like one example of going back over knowledge. And there's definitely some thoughts that I held at that time that I no longer do, which is interesting. And like there was a part of me that was a little bit nervous because it is in a public forum, that someone might then still think that that's a thought that I hold. But I just have to like remind myself that that was a time and place, and in that space that was the best knowledge that I had at the time. And, you know, I've moved and I've grown and I've shifted, and I just hope that people kind of give me grace for that too. Yeah, there's definitely some things that I'm like, why did I say that? Yeah, but Mello, thoughts?
No thoughts, just action.
Can't hide.
Yeah. No, I feel my relationship with my past knowledge bases has actually, I've come full. Well, I don't know if you can say I can say I've come full circle, but at this moment, what's alive for me is that it took me a while to get over my ego status in proximity to absolutism, because I feel like for me, when I was the way that I was conditioned both consciously and unconsciously was through trying to find the truth through a religious sense. So I kind of took that skill set of trying to find the truth and what one truth looks like into my learning capacities. And there were very much times that were outside of the podcast as well as inside the podcast where I was speaking in absolutism, where I had a rooted fundamental belief, and that's why for me I'm like which is amazing now, and I appreciate my journey through that, because now I'm 100% invested in the ignorance, like, and I fashion it as the ocean of ignorance that exists. So for me, I swim deeply in the ocean of ignorance, and not because I deny the enlightenment of life. It's because I understand the enlightenment of life, and then I also leave room for the transformation of enlightenment to be debunked, and to be reassessed and to be looked at from multiple angles, and assessed from multiple different lenses, which is the beauty of life. And it's something that I feel, for me, it was a hard lesson to learn through academia and through my, because I'm currently in my master's journey as well. So it's a hard pill to swallow, and it is. I guess it gets harder when you're reading academic journals of giants that are intellectually like, I am so far away from your articulation game. And when you're reading a lot of those academic giants, and their concepts and their theories and their understanding of the world that they're in is so potent that you're like, I really believe that this is true. And yes, it is true for this moment and for this time period and for that moment that I was receiving it in. And bring it back to the question, it was a humbling experience for me to check myself and for me to see myself, and for me, like, the more that I gave grace to my ignorance and to my absolutism, which is still a part of me. So I don't deny that it's gone. I embrace that that's a part of me, and I also acknowledge that there's times where there is absolutism and there's times when there isn't. And even with the times with absolutism, I'm like, no, this absolutism for my thinking and my perspective, not entirely. So I'm very much happy to be swimming in the pool of ignorance right now, or the ocean of ignorance that I'm in. So thank you so much for inviting me to that. And yes, I love that I've got to learn. I've had the opportunity to learn, because I know that a lot of us are I know the opposite, because the opposite would be to not reflect or not reflects. And that's been a potent part of this journey with Kelsey, who I'm so thankful for. I've been very much been educated humbly and been mirrored humbly as well, if that's a word. But yeah, that's where I'm at in proximity to your question, Jaimie.
Yeah, it's definitely a more humble way of going about thinking about knowledge, but it ends up leaving much more space for you to be able to grow and bring more knowledge, doesn't it? I guess the other thing I was going to say in response to Kelsey about this being archived online, it could be here. I guess it's really important to think about that our history is important, and so things like this. I think it's important to have them from the historical context, and you only have to look back at, the people from before our time. And I'm thinking about, like, for example, queer communities. Some of the language they might have used might not be exactly what we'd use today, but we're really standing on the shoulders of our elders, really, aren't we? History is important, and knowing about that is important too. So I think we need to be aware of that, and really valuing, and I think that's a real treasure for me personally, and I think our communities really need to treasure that too, and make sure that we do treasure that, even if some of the words may not be exactly the way we would do things, and things have moved on. It's still massive. We just don't know the context that they were in. For example, like fighting for homosexual law reform or whatever it was, even back before then. It's a completely different world, and I'm sure whatever happens in the future as well, they'll be in a different world too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think that there's so much importance, particularly in Aotearoa, placed on whakapapa, which I like humbly agree with. I'm just curious, like, as a queer person, like, how do we honor our queer ancestry too? Like those people, like you said, that built and fought for homosexual law reform, or fought for all these things that we now can do as queer people, like get married, or all these different things that we were never allowed to do, and like taking it out of the DSM from us, like a mental health issue. I'm just like, how do I honor these people? And I think for me, that looks like this, of having a conversation and bringing people in and just existing as a queer person in the world. But yeah, I'm curious, like...
and I think though
No,
I think the intergenerational conversations are so important too. I know, I'm guessing you two are a bit younger than me, but we're probably not super different in ages. One thing I saw, I lived in Canada for a while. One thing I saw there, which I really loved, is in one of the queer, I guess it was like not like a big gay out, but like it was a smaller kind of park thing, and they had this like, it was like a booth tent area where it was just these older lesbians, and people could just go there and just talk to them about what it was like when they were younger, and it was mostly, I guess, younger people, in a space for them to be able to come and connect and learn from their elders, which I thought was really lovely. And I really think more spaces like that could be really helpful and powerful for your question about honouring our elders.
Yeah, for sure. I found that when I did my honours program, it was around like creating a platform for queer community to share their own stories, because I find often we're spoken for rather than with. And part of that program was a publication that Melissa was actually in, that was part of our whakapapa, part of our origin story. But there was a older lesbian couple that were in there, and at the time when they were sharing their stories, particularly around the attachment to the word butch, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand. Why are you so attached to this word? And then as like the weeks went on and I spent more time with them and they shared more of their stories, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But as like an ignorant young person, I was like, why are you so attached to labels? Labels aren't a thing, blah, blah, blah. Different time. And like, it was really humbling for them to spend time and to share stories and to help me understand why that word is so important for them. And I really, really valued that out of that project. It was amazing. Yeah. But I think that like plays into what you're saying before about like different time, different words, different language, and how quickly that moves. Yeah.
I really echo both what you're saying, and I also would offer, so to me, it's the privilege that I have right now is is that I get to negotiate these conversations. My predecessors didn't get a choice. They didn't get a choice. My privilege right now is that they did the mahi so that I can negotiate these terms, these statuses, these terminologies, all of these things, and that's something that I really am so thankful for. I'm so thankful for, and it doesn't matter if it's a Western whakaaro or Indigenous whakaaro or whatever whakaaro it is. I get to negotiate in 2021 because of the hard work of my like the whakapapa of our queer ancestors. So to me, because I don't really like at the beginning. I used to really subscribe to the whole Western Indigenous, and I still there's still parts of me because in academia that's a real fight. That's a real that's world to me. I'm like, that's World War III in academia, like the critics, the back and forth, and which like it's to me. I understand that there's a lot of academics as well that are very much. Actually can see through the BS, and it's like we're describing the same things through different languages, like we're just using different words, and it's a negotiation. And yes, there are massive critiques that are needed, and also those critiques go back to community, which I feel like that's what a lot of the academic jargons are not like, they're not rooted in community, or they're not coming back to community, and it gives them a sense of elitism in a way, because it's just like we get to theorize about all of these things, and we've got all of the intelligence up here, and we get to look down upon anyone who's not up there with the game. And I'm like, is this what academia is? Like, is this the playing field that we play on? But yeah, so that's just my personal experience with academia, and I also recognize that I'm coming through to academia from FMS, so the Faculty of Māori and Indigenous Studies, which does have a specific different lens, and it does privilege that lens from a specific worldview, there was a time when Western whakaaro was just completely and then to a point where I'm like, actually, I use English as a bridge to communicate with my brothers and sisters in Wananui Kiwa, which is a gift, and like, to me, yep, there's mamai to that gift and there's hurt to that gift, but that's a gift nevertheless. Like, if I can't receive that as a gift, what I'm doing is being nitpicky and cherry picky, or pigeonholing the gift. And that's something that I feel like I really relate and resonate with you two, in terms of when you're talking about the whakapapa of our queer plight as a collective. I totally agree. I totally see the benefits of our oneness, and at the same time our individual plights within this oneness. I also am curious though, because I'm 100% ignorant to this, and I do want to ask, because this is something that's an ongoing conversation for me, and I'm not wanting this one person to answer on behalf of everybody. So whenever people use the word trans, and whenever people are talking about the word trans, are they talking about the process, or the person, or the what is happening in the? Because to me, I'm like, I don't really associate with the term. I associate with Jaimie first, and then the terminology. If Jaimie wants to bring that in, we can talk about that. But I'm like, I don't so to me, can you please help me understand where you're at specifically, not so much speaking on behalf of transness, but where you're at with this conversation?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and Kelsey might have some thoughts too. So I guess when you're talking about a process, the word that's often used is things like transition, or affirming your gender, I guess, or being able to embody your gender. But yeah, I feel like being trans is actually about much more than that. I guess for one, it's an identity. So, it's part of, I identify as a trans woman. So that's that, there's a word there, and identify as part of a trans community. And I think a good way of thinking about it is, I don't know if you've heard it come across the term malu, cisgender, or cis people. So I guess that's the contrast, although, we don't want to be creating more binaries, but, that's one way of thinking about it that might be helpful. So, yeah, thinking about people whose genders, we all have a gender. It might be, and we talked about our pronouns, or our genders, like woman, man, non-binary, etc. Agender. Some people don't have genders, so I did say we all have genders, but, I guess we generally have a bit of a relationship with gender, just some of us might think about it more than others. And so, yeah, trans people are people whose gender doesn't always match with society's expectations based on, when we're born, and we're assigned a sex, and there's all those expectations, and the expectations of what a gender is that come from that. And so trans people, cis people, are those whose genders generally fits with those expectations. It's a bit of a crude explanation, but trans people generally are those whose gender doesn't match with that. So I guess that's perhaps a bit of an academic explanation. I'm guessing Kelsey might have some more thoughts too.
Yeah, I can talk for myself and my experience. Very similar to what you were saying, Jaimie, of when you're born, you're assigned a sex at birth, and then I felt like, and from stories that I've heard from other people, then this whole lot of social expectations then put on you dependent on the body that you were born with. And for a long time I was like, yeah, okay, all good, whatever. Just didn't really think about it. And then as I got older, I was like, well, I don't actually subscribe to that social expectation of me, and I also don't want that one. So like, what do I where do I exist? Like somewhere in the middle. And my experience is that I was gifted this body, and this body is like a whare tangata, like there's a body that can give life, and I'm really grateful for that. But I feel like I can have this body and recognize that, and you know, the gifts that it gives me to be able to navigate this world while not subscribing to the social expectation that is attached to it. And so I understand that gender is a thing, and there's a whole social construct around gender, and I just choose not to engage. So words that are often used, like I don't identify myself as a particular word in relation to gender, but the one that does feel the most comfortable, and it's often one that other people use to describe me, not one that I would choose to describe myself, is non-binary, of just like not engaging with the binary. Yeah.
Potent.
Yeah.
Because to me, I feel like if we normalize people's perspectives, and for me, if I normalize the transness as the majority norm, I feel like for me, in my worldview, and please do check me in and call me in. I'm inviting for myself to be called in this whakaro. But if I put trans as the norm for the human plight, there's some of us that meet that enlightenment faster than others. You know, like to meet the enlightenment of like not subscribing to the expectations. You know, there's some of us that meet that at a faster rate, and then the majority demonize that. The select few that meet and can see through the BS of being like, wait a minute, this social structure shouldn't be here. Wait a minute, these things shouldn't be here. Wait a minute. Why is there block specifically gendered in this space? So to me, I feel like that's where I'm at with a lot of my trans, like my trans proximity, like myself in proximity to trans walks. But at the same time, I know that I'm coming from a place where I don't actually I'm at a place where I don't subscribe to gay or trans or anything, and I'm actually just subscribing just to just good people. Good people. And I'm like, and I understand though that as well, which is the main, like I feel like I hear it in your conversation, because there's like in specific pockets, where scientifically people are like, yeah, this is absolutism, you're a male, you're a female, and I'm like, I get that, I don't deny that. What you deny is the rest of the oppressions that are happening in the space when it comes to gender. So is that something that like have you two experienced that, or have you two already wayfinded your thoughts and feelings around that conversation, or where are you two at with that? I know it's a massive one, but I'm at a so I guess I'm curious. I'm curious into that space, because that's where I'm at the moment.
Thanks, Malu. Did you want to go, Kelsey?
Yeah.
I can go. All right. You can go first.
I think from my experience, I have seen or perceived that straight cisgendered people don't question it because they don't feel like they have to, because the way that they operate and the way that they feel comfortable in the world is what is considered normal. So there's why would they question something that is accepted in the world? Because they've never had to be questioned, and they've never been questioned about how they navigate the world.
Absolutely, 100%.
Anything to add, Jaimie?
I guess for me, I think it's like you touched on, Malu, there is that, I guess, the political side of things. So, that being trans, and, many people say, and I tend to agree, that, being trans isn't quite inherently political, because it's, in some ways challenges the structure of the gender binary that's just so prevalent. And that's true, and I think you need to have that there. I think there's also that important to keep in mind that, we're all different, have different, I guess, experiences of our genders, and that's something that, sits differently with different people. And I feel like I don't want to get into the whole, nature nurture biological side of things, but there is diversity in all of us humans. We're different in just so many ways, and that's so important. So I think it's just the reality, and gender is no different. Nature doesn't make things happen in binaries. There's always that difference. And
wait, can you just say that again, please? I feel like I needed to hear that. Sorry to interrupt you, but you said nature doesn't make any. Can you just say that again, please?
Well, I guess nature loves diversity. There's always that diversity, and that people things in nature don't always fit neatly into, for example, two binary categories. There's always more going on. That's just seems to be the nature of how we are. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying with that is, so while there is the political side of things, which you're touching on, I guess there's also people's sense and experiences of their gender, and whether that's how they embody it, or it might be more political for other people. Yeah, I think that's something that also needs to be recognised quite strongly as well. So different people experience their gender in different ways, just like people experience their sexuality and any other aspects of their identities in different ways too. Yeah, so I think that's really important too. And yeah, obviously we don't always want to cut off gender from sexuality and all these other things. It's all a complex intermeshment of all of these different things, which could, they're not always the same for every person, but often there is complexities there with these other, with our bodies or our sexualities as well as our genders. Yeah, so I think, yeah, there's the diversity, and that's where we used to I guess where some symbols of like the rainbow, for example, is there's that diversity, which is just much more, much more akin to or represents the nature of who we are more.
And I think also that complexity of experience can also be found in other contexts as well, like in regards to culture or ethnicity or socioeconomic status or whatever. Like there's like this word or term, but the individual experience within that can be vastly different.
Absolutely.
Totally agree. No, thank you so much for that.
And of course, there's also our, our experiences as well, and the context that we live in massively shape who we are as well. Yeah, with all these things too. If you were 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago, we didn't have words like non-binary. 50 years ago, very few people knew about trans people, for example. So yeah, these things are so important too.
100. I'm so thankful to have you two really enlighten me to that, because it's a relevant question, and I feel like because the translation between people who are in the know and people who don't know, and I guess there's going off one of the whakāros that we had with last season, with ignorance, it actually breeds fear. So that was coming from one of from Meg's from last season, and it's that translation from the like I was saying, the academic know-how with the jargon, and that translation to the common, like the communities. That's just not like, it's like, if you don't know the academic wish-wash or the jargon, you're not in the know. And that's, I've found that in my master's journey as well, that a lot of the things, like a lot of our perceived issues in the realm has actually been already catered to, and a lot of academic conversations that don't filter down to communities, and the communities are still in the front lines, like, you know, having these absolutism like arguments, and I'm like, that doesn't exist. Like, that doesn't exist. Or yeah, so I guess that's where I was coming from, and I'm really grateful to get this this insight. I guess for me, I also wanted to offer. So what's in the, like, in terms of you've talked about all of the ways that you're able to move and where knowledge for you. What's in the archives between psychology? So, like, what's in the FAQ for psychology conversations or knowledge that you currently carry? So if you don't want to, like, you know, I don't expect you to speak on behalf of psychology, but what's the FAQ in terms of the knowledge that you currently have? What's in the FAQ for those knowledge bases?
Yeah, because psychology is just so broad. I mean, and I'm just, you know, one small sector of it, and yeah, I guess
world leading.
I'm just, yeah. Look, and I feel like psychology's at a bit of a time of change in Aotearoa with, there's been you know, really a reckoning of psychology's role in colonisation, and there's a Treaty of Waitangi claim against, you know, whether the discipline has been meeting its obligations under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Yeah, so I feel like, psychology in general is at a bit of a crossroads where, some of these conversations, like what you're perhaps talking about, Malu in Māori and Indigenous studies, and well, maybe not necessarily just within that within that worldview or over in that faculty, perhaps are still somewhat playing out in more broadly, and I feel like we really need to change and make sure we're responsive to all our communities, that we have the diversity that represents all our communities. For example, University of Waikato, it's, we have massive Māori Pacifica students, for example. We need to make sure that, they're having their needs met. That's super important. Thinking about things like gender diversity, sexuality. There's been great strides for something like psychology, with moving away from a individualistic, pathologizing way of looking at things. And I'm actually really happy to be part of, now I work with most researchers in psychology and gender and sexuality will be interested in things like minority stress and what are the things going out in our communities. What are the protective factors that can be helpful against, for example, oppression and stigma that people face in our communities. So those kind of things, which I think, are much more broader and more grounded in our social context and our societies and what's going on in our worlds, which I think is much much stronger. I really hope that all of psychology as a discipline will make sure it's engaged critically with psychology, not like, as you mentioned, Malu, being in our ivory towers and away from where all the other community conversations are happening as well. So I think it's really important that we keep being in touch with the communities and the needs of our broad, diverse communities, whatever that looks like, intersectionality, etc.
And I would also offer vice versa as well. I feel like there needs to be spaces in community where they actually make way for the intelligence of academia, because it's almost like, because that works as well, and then also this doesn't work as well, because it's like we don't hold the space all the time for community to really embrace the different intelligence that are current. Not so much because a lot of the whakaaro around Pacific studies is in the 70s and the 80s, and that's when our Pacific literature started really flowing in, and I'm like, there was an advocacy that was really strong. So it was very like, and it does empower you, but then it also separates you from the community that you're currently, well, it separated me. Let me not talk about anyone else. It separated me from my current community. So I really uffy what you're saying as well. And I would also offer that it also works the other way. Like, I don't see communities in my community anyways, when we don't hold space for new waves of intelligence to come through and influence. It's usually more the time, and I think it would hold true for other communities. It's like, oh, it's new. Oh no, there's not enough research that's gone into it because it's still new. And I'm like, what? Yeah. What?
Where's the space for innovation?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's really just about coming together. You know, the more time that we can be face to face, kanohi ki te kanohi. Yeah, I think that's really what it's going to be about.
Amazing. So good, Jaimie. So good. Thank you so much for coming through and like sharing your thoughts and whakaaro with us. We do really appreciate it, and we know that this is going to land for so many people. So thank you so much. If people want to connect with you or find your research or anything like that, how can they do that?
Kia ora, Kelsey, and yeah, I'll just say this has really been, like I thought it might be at the beginning, a conversation between, really three people. So it's, and I'm glad that I've been able to bring my little part to that. So thank you so much for the opportunity and the time to be able to be part of your great innovation. And, you know, we're talking about being connected, academics being connected with the wider community. You know, this is exactly what you're doing here. Both of you, so that's great. So it's just so wonderful. I'm pretty easy to find. You can find my contact details if you look me up on the University of Waikato website.
Beautiful.
Bye.
Yes, and we wish you all the well on your journey as well. And so also just let us know if you're wanting any afi or if you're wanting any amplifications. We're open sourcing. You know, you're a part of our community now, and we do love our community members. You've enriched both me, and I know that our community will be really happy to see themselves at a different space with you as their reference point. You know, and that's something that we really privilege, and I'm so thankful to be able to receive your intelligence and to receive you shining brighter, because, you know, the thing that I really love about you is that people will underestimate you straight away, and then when they finally hear you start speaking, it's like boom. And I'm like, I like someone who's like, you know, who looks really quiet, you know, and like poof, this is the intelligence. So I'm just letting you know I'm so appreciative of you because you can bring it. You bring the heat in such a graceful way, and you're not calling anybody out. You're like, hey, this is what we currently know right now. So thank you so much, and yes, please join us in for our final jingle out. So all you need to say is fuck you. You can emphasize whichever one you want, either the fa or the q. You can emphasize whatever one. But yes. The fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you. The fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you. Thank you so much.
See you later, whanau.
Fuck you, dude.